Hey there, and welcome to Tales by June, where hearts break, heal, and sometimes seek revenge. Let's begin today's story.
Hey, before we begin, let me know where you're watching from. I love seeing how far these stories travel. And if you enjoy this kind of content, don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay tuned. I sat by the window, staring at the faint trail of raindrops sliding down the glass. The house was quiet, too quiet. The kind of silence that doesn't comfort but suffocates. It wasn't the peace of home. It was the emptiness of being unwanted. My hands rested on my lap, fingers twisting the hem of my dress out of habit, waiting, always waiting for a voice that never called my name, for eyes that never turned toward me. I was his wife, legally, publicly, on paper. Yet in this home, I was nothing more than a ghost. His footsteps echoed faintly from the hallway, crisp and quick, as though he always had somewhere better to be. My heart jumped at the sound, foolishly, traitorously, as it had done for years. I rose to greet him, to ask how his day had gone, to offer him tea the way I always did. But he didn't see me. He walked past without a glance, the faint scent of his cologne brushing against me like a reminder of how close he was, yet how impossibly far. "Dinner is ready," I said softly. He paused for a moment, hand on his phone, scrolling, his brows furrowed. His voice came sharp, clipped. "I don't have time. I'll eat later." Later. Always later. A later that never came. I stood there in the hallway, my words stuck in my throat. I wanted to ask him, "Don't you see me? Don't you remember that I'm your wife? Don't you care if I eat alone every night?" But those questions had no place in our marriage. They had never had a place. Instead, I watched as he grabbed his coat again. His phone buzzed and his eyes softened for the first time all evening. A faint smile tugged at his lips, the kind of smile I had prayed for once, dreamed of seeing directed at me. But it wasn't for me. It never was. "It's her again, isn't it?" The words slipped out before I could stop them. His hand froze on the doorknob, and for a moment I thought he might deny it, might offer me some fragment of reassurance. But he only turned his face slightly, his voice laced with irritation. "Don't start. She needs me. She's not well." She. His first love. The one who had walked away from him once, only to return years later. The one he never stopped loving. And me? I was the one who stayed. The one who carried his burdens, managed his home, gave him everything I had, my youth, my devotion, my whole being. But none of it was enough. To him, I was a shadow. To her, he would give the sun. I lowered my eyes. "Be careful." He didn't answer. The door shut behind him, and I was left alone in the silence once more. It was late that night when fate made its cruel choice. I was driving home after running errands, my heart heavy, when I saw his car speeding down the slick road ahead. The rain poured harder, blurring the world into streaks of gray. Suddenly, headlights swerved into his lane. My breath caught. Without thinking, I pressed my foot down, steering into the path of danger, a scream tearing from my throat. My car collided with the other vehicle before it could strike his. The sound of metal crushing, glass shattering, and my body being thrown into darkness filled the night. When I opened my eyes again, I was in a sterile white room. The hospital ceiling loomed above me, cold and unforgiving. Pain seared through my body, but it wasn't the broken ribs or bleeding wounds that hurt most. It was the emptiness beside me. I turned my head, searching the doorway. He would come, I thought. Surely he would come. I had saved him with everything I had left. Surely he would see me now. Minutes bled into hours. Nurses came and went. Machines beeped steadily, but the doorway remained empty. Has anyone asked about me?" I whispered to the nurse. She hesitated. Pity flashed in her eyes before she answered. "Your husband, he's in another ward. The woman he came with has a fever. He hasn't left her side." Her words sliced through me like a knife. He wasn't here. He wasn't coming. Even as I lay broken, breathing through the shards of my own sacrifice, he chose her. A hollow laugh slipped from my lips, cracked and weak. Tears welled in my eyes and slipped silently down my cheeks. How foolish I had been. How utterly foolish, to give everything to a man who never once gave me his heart. I closed my eyes, the weight of regret crushing me. My breaths grew shallow, each one more fragile than the last. I thought of the years I had wasted begging for scraps of affection, of the countless nights I lay awake beside him, staring at the ceiling, waiting for warmth that never came. If there was such a thing as fate, as mercy, then I wished for only one thing: a second chance. A chance to live again, not for him, not for his love that was never mine, but for myself. A chance to be free of these chains of devotion, to reclaim the pieces of me I had given away so carelessly. Please, I whispered into the darkness, my voice trembling, if there is another life, let me start over. Let me love differently. Let me never kneel before him again. The beeping slowed. My tears blurred into the sterile white light above, and then silence. That was how I died. Alone, abandoned, my heart still tethered to a man who never once turned back. But fate is cruel and fate is kind, and my story was far from over. The first thing I felt was warmth. Not the blinding hospital lights, not the sting of needles or the choking scent of disinfectant, but warmth. The soft glow of morning sunlight brushing against my face, and the familiar sound of sparrows chirping outside the window. My body jerked upright. My breath caught in my throat. I looked around. This was not the hospital. This was my room. My old room. The pale curtains my mother had sewn by hand, the posters on the wall, corners curled from years of sun, the vanity cluttered with perfumes I had adored in my youth. My heart pounded wildly as I stumbled from the bed and rushed to the mirror. The reflection staring back at me wasn't the broken, hollow woman from that last night. No, this was me. Younger. My cheeks were smooth, my eyes wide with life, my lips untouched by sorrow. I lifted trembling hands to my face as though touching myself would prove it true. I am back? My voice broke, half sob, half laughter. I'm really back. Memories of the hospital bed, the silence, the coldness of my last breath flooded me. My chest tightened, tears spilling down my cheeks. But this time, they were tears of overwhelming relief. Fate had heard me. My plea had been answered. I had been given a second chance. For days, I wandered through my home in a daze, drinking in every detail like a starving soul who had been denied food for too long. The smell of my mother's cooking wafting from the kitchen, the sound of my father's newspaper rustling in the living room, the way the evening sunlight painted everything gold. They were alive. They were here. My family, who in my last life I had neglected so cruelly in my blind devotion to him. I had chosen to chase a man's cold shadow instead of treasuring the arms that were always open for me. This time, I swore it would be different. Mom, I whispered one night as she placed another serving on my plate. She frowned playfully, telling me to eat more. I swallowed hard, my throat thick with emotion. I love you. She looked at me in surprise, then smiled. Silly child, what's gotten into you? Nothing. Everything. But with the sweetness of this rebirth came the bitter sting of memory. Because I knew what was coming. I knew the path I had once walked, the path that led me to him. It was only a few months before the wedding. I remembered it clearly. How I had begged my parents for the marriage. How I had fallen so deeply, so foolishly in love with him. I had seen him once at a friend's gathering, the way he stood apart, tall and quiet, his eyes sharp but distant. I had been drawn to him like a moth to flame, certain that if I only tried hard enough, I could warm his heart. Are you sure? My father had asked me then, his brows furrowed with worry. He doesn't seem invested. Marriage is for life. Think carefully. But I hadn't listened. Yes, Dad, I had said firmly, clutching my chest where my heart pounded with youthful obsession. It has to be him. No one else. My mother had looked at me concerned, hesitant. But love can't be one-sided forever, darling. He must love you too. He will, I had insisted. I'll make him love me. I'll give him everything. He'll see my heart. How blind I had been. How I had mistaken sacrifice for strength, humiliation for patience, devotion for love. And so my parents, reluctant but unable to deny their daughter's desperation, had agreed. They had reached out to his family. And thus, the wedding arrangements had begun. Now, sitting at my desk with trembling hands, I stared at the invitation proof stacked neatly in a box. My chest tightened. Not this time. This time, I would not walk into that cage of indifference. I would not trade my life for his coldness. I closed the box firmly. My reflection in the window looked back at me. Steadier now. No, I whispered. I won't marry him. The words were like a key turning in a lock inside my chest. For the first time in years, perhaps for the first time ever, I felt free. I would live this life differently. I would treasure the parents who had always stood by me. I would laugh with friends I had abandoned before. I would chase dreams of my own instead of throwing them at a man's feet. And him? He could keep his love for another. He could keep his cold smiles, his sharp words, his indifference. This time, he would never have the chance to break me. This time, I vowed, he would never be my husband. But fate has its own cruel rhythm, and as I folded the box of invitations, I heard the faint buzz of my phone. A name flashed across the screen. The very name that had once made my heart race, that had once been the center of my world. His. The man who had been my everything in one life. And though my hand trembled, though my heart remembered every wound he had carved into me, I pressed decline. Then I drew a deep, steady breath. This was my life now, my second chance, and this time, it belonged to me. I woke early the next morning, my heart heavy with determination. The morning air smelled of jasmine from the garden, and the faint chatter of my parents drifted from the kitchen. For a long moment, I stood outside the door, my hands clenched, gathering the courage to say what I should have said long ago. Inside, my father sat with his usual newspaper, glasses perched on his nose. My mother busied herself with the teapot, her gentle humming filling the room. It was such an ordinary scene, yet to me it was more precious than jewels. "Mom, Dad," I said, stepping in. They both looked up. My father frowned at the seriousness in my tone, my mother tilting her head in concern. "I need to talk to you," I continued, forcing the words past the lump in my throat. "About the wedding." A silence fell. My father set the paper down slowly. "What about it?" I inhaled deeply. My hands trembled, but I kept them steady on the table. "I don't want it. I don't want to marry him." My mother blinked, surprise flickering in her eyes. My father leaned back, studying me carefully. "Are you saying this because of cold feet? Or do you really mean it?" "I mean it," I said firmly, though my voice cracked with the weight of memory. I thought I loved him. I thought I could make him love me too. But now I see, that's not what marriage should be. I don't want to throw my life away chasing someone who doesn't care for me. My mother's eyes softened, filling with the kind of relief only a parent knows. "Darling, are you sure? Last month you were begging us for this. You cried. You said you couldn't live without him." I closed my eyes. In another life, I had said those exact words. In another life, my stubbornness had led me into years of humiliation. "I was foolish," I admitted, my voice low. "But I've thought about it. I know now, love can't be begged for. It can't be forced. If I marry him, I'll only suffer." My father's lips twitched, as though he was holding back a sigh of long-suppressed truth. Then finally he nodded. "If that's how you feel, then we'll stop the arrangements." I looked at them both, overwhelmed. My chest ached as tears pricked my eyes. How many years had I ignored their wisdom before? How many times had I brushed off their concern, believing I knew better? Yet here they were again, supporting me without question. "Thank you," I whispered, my throat tight. "This time, I'll listen to you. I'll live for myself. I promise." My mother reached across the table and squeezed my hand, her smile trembling. That's all we ever wanted. Later that afternoon, I left the house to clear my head. The autumn wind carried the scent of roasted chestnuts from a nearby stall, mingling with the laughter of children walking home from school. Life felt vibrant, new, as though the world itself was welcoming me back. I should have known fate would not let me slip by so quietly. I turned a corner, and there he was, tall, sharp, with that same distant gaze that had once unraveled me. He stood by his car, speaking on his phone, his profile cut against the sky. Time seemed to halt. My breath caught in my chest, and for a heartbeat I was pulled back into the old ache, the years of longing, the foolish hope, the endless nights waiting for his affection. I shook my head. No, not this time. As if sensing my eyes, he turned. Our gazes met. Recognition flickered across his face, followed by a faint curve of his lips, a polite smile, one that held no depth, no warmth. "You," he said, tucking his phone away. His voice was as smooth and cool as I remembered. "I was just about to call. I heard your parents reached out about the wedding. I wanted to talk." My heart pounded. Once those words would have made me breathless with joy. Once I would have clung to them like a lifeline. But now they felt hollow. "I already spoke with them," I said, my tone steady. "The wedding's off." His brows furrowed, a flicker of irritation passing over his features. "Off? Why?" "Because I don't want it," I replied, lifting my chin. I realized something important. Marriage isn't about begging for love, it's about two people choosing each other. And you. I let out a quiet breath, my eyes firm on his. You've never chosen me. For the first time, I saw him falter. His lips parted, his eyes searching mine as though I were speaking in a language he couldn't quite grasp. In my past life, I would have mistaken that silence for hesitation, for a chance. But now I knew better. Wait, he said finally, his tone sharpening. This is sudden. You were the one who... Yes, I interrupted, my voice trembling but resolute. I was the one who begged for you. I was the one who thought I could change you, but I won't do that again. His expression darkened, as though unused to rejection, unused to being told no. But I didn't give him the chance to answer. I stepped past him, the cool autumn breeze brushing against my face, carrying away the last remnants of a love that had shackled me. For the first time, I felt light, free. Behind me, I could feel his eyes on my back, confused, unsettled, perhaps even wounded by the firmness in my voice. But I didn't look back, because this time, the story was mine to write. The news spread faster than I expected. It started as whispers, then grew into a wave of gossip, rippling families, friends, and acquaintances. They said I had been rejected, that he had turned me down, that I had begged for a wedding he never wanted, and finally, he had cut me off. The words were sharp, meant to wound. I could almost hear them in the marketplace, in the quiet corners of social gatherings, murmurs laced with pity, with mockery. Poor girl, she must be devastated. She chased him so shamelessly, and in the end, he still threw her away. She should have known better. He was always out of her league. In my previous life, those words would have destroyed me. I would have locked myself in my room, cried until my chest burned, begged for just one more chance to prove myself. I would have believed every cruel whisper, convinced that I was the problem, that I was unworthy of love. But this time, I felt nothing but calm. Because I knew the truth. I hadn't been rejected. I had chosen. I had pulled myself out of the fire before it consumed me. Still, his arrogance stung. It was clear to me that he had twisted the story himself. His pride couldn't stand being the one discarded, the one left behind. So he painted himself as the cold victor, the man who had spared me the humiliation of chasing him. I should have been angry. I should have felt bitterness. But when I thought of him, of the way he used to walk past me without a glance, of how he sat beside another woman while I lay dying, I realized his words no longer had power over me. Let him talk. Let him spread lies. Let him cling to his pride. I had no interest in fighting for the truth in a world that never cared for mine before. My silence was my freedom. So I turned my gaze elsewhere, toward the life I had neglected for so long. Each morning, I joined my father for tea, listening to his quiet wisdom, laughing at his dry jokes. Each evening, I sat with my mother in the kitchen, learning the recipes she had always wanted to teach me, her hands guiding mine as though I were still a child. "I never thought I'd have you like this again," she said one night, her eyes misty as she watched me chop vegetables with clumsy determination. "You were always so busy chasing after him. We hardly had time together." My throat tightened. I reached for her hand. "I know, Mom. I'm sorry, I won't waste it again." Her smile trembled, but it was the kind of smile that forgives, that heals. And for the first time, I realized this was love. Pure, quiet, unconditional love, the kind I had thrown away before. I also began to rediscover myself. I had always loved painting, though I had abandoned it in my old life when he dismissed it as a childish hobby. My brushes had gathered dust, my canvases remained blank. But now I opened the old cupboard and pulled them out again. At first, my strokes were hesitant, clumsy. My hands shook as though I was learning for the first time. But soon, the colors began to flow, vibrant and alive, as though they had been waiting all along for me to return. I painted the jasmine from my garden, the way the morning light danced on the leaves. I painted my mother's smile, my father's hands holding a teacup. I painted myself, eyes clear, standing tall, no longer bent beneath someone else's shadow. Each painting was a reminder that this life was mine, that my heart was mine. Of course, he did not stay silent for long. A week later, he confronted me in the marketplace. The air was crisp, filled with the smell of fresh bread and roasted corn. People bustled around us, but when his tall frame stepped into my path, the world seemed to hush. "You've been quiet," he said, his eyes narrowing. Everyone's talking. Don't you care what they're saying? I looked at him calmly, my basket resting on my arm. No. His brows furrowed as though the answer was incomprehensible. You should. People think you're pitiful. They think I rejected you. Let them think it, I said softly, my tone even. Their words don't matter, and neither do yours. For a moment, silence hung between us. He stared at me as though I had changed into someone unrecognizable. His lips parted, but no words came. Perhaps he had expected tears, pleading, anger. Perhaps he had expected the same desperate girl he once knew. But she was gone. I stepped around him, the afternoon sunlight spilling across my path, and didn't look back. That night, as I sat by my easel, painting the golden sky over my parents' home, I realized something profound. Redemption wasn't about making him regret. It wasn't about proving to the world that I was worth more. It was about me. About choosing myself every single day, no matter how loud the whispers became, no matter how bruised his ego grew. This was my second chance, and I would not waste it on him. The days began to move like flowing water, steady, gentle, carrying me toward a new season of my life. Every morning, I painted. The scent of oils and acrylics filled my small corner of the house, colors blooming across canvases like secret gardens. My father would pass by and peek in, pretending not to linger too long, but I could see the pride shining in his eyes. My mother often brought me tea, placing it by my side as I lost myself in strokes of blue, green, and gold. Each painting was like breathing again after years of suffocation. It was mine, completely mine. And slowly, word of my art spread. A friend of my mother's visited one afternoon, saw a half-finished canvas leaning against the wall, and gasped. Within days, I was invited to display my work at a small local exhibition. It wasn't grand, not yet, but to me it was a dream I had once buried, now returning to life. I was living for myself, and the joy of it made me glow in ways I never had before. It was during this time that my parents approached me. We sat in the living room one evening, the scent of fresh tea filling the air. My mother exchanged a glance with my father before speaking gently. "There's something we want to discuss with you," she began. I set my brush down, curious. "What is it?" "There's a young man," my father said, adjusting his glasses. "His family is known to us. Respectable, kind. He's recently returned to the city. They've asked if we would consider introducing you." My heart stilled. In my last life, I would have dismissed the suggestion immediately. My eyes had seen only one man, my heart chained to him alone. But now, things were different. "An arranged marriage?" I asked quietly. "Not forced," my mother said quickly, reaching for my hand. "Only a meeting. You don't have to decide anything, but—" Her eyes softened. "We'd like you to at least meet him. You deserve someone who will see you, truly see you." I looked between them, my chest tightening with gratitude. They weren't trying to push me, only offering me the chance I had once refused. And for the first time, I felt no fear in saying yes. "All right," I whispered. "I'll meet him." The meeting was arranged at a quiet cafe in the heart of the city. I wore a simple dress, my nerves hidden beneath a calm smile. The air smelled faintly of coffee and fresh pastries, the soft murmur of voices blending into a gentle backdrop. And then he walked in. Tall, with kind eyes that crinkled slightly when he smiled, carrying himself with a quiet confidence. He wasn't flashy, nor cold, nor distant. He simply looked alive, present. He approached the table, bowed slightly, and said, "You must be her." His voice was gentle, steady. My heart, for the first time in years, didn't twist with pain at the sound of a man's words. "I am," I said softly. "And you?" He chuckled lightly, introducing himself. His name rolled easily off his tongue, and I found myself repeating it, letting it settle in my memory. We spoke of simple things at first, our families, our work, our childhoods. He asked about my interests, and when I mentioned painting, his eyes lit with genuine curiosity. "Do you have any of your work here?" he asked. I blinked, surprised by the sincerity in his tone. Slowly, I pulled up a photo on my phone of the jasmine painting from my garden. He leaned in, studying it carefully. "It's beautiful. You must have poured yourself into this." I felt heat rush to my cheeks. No one, not him, not in my last life, had ever spoken of my art that way. "Yes," I whispered, almost to myself. "I did." He smiled then, a smile that reached his eyes. "I'd like to see more someday." And for the first time in what felt like forever, I didn't feel like a shadow beside someone else's light. I felt seen. Over the following weeks, we met again and again, sometimes with our families, sometimes just the two of us. We walked through gardens, where the autumn leaves crunched beneath our feet. We shared meals in quiet restaurants, laughter spilling between us easily. He never pressed, never demanded. He listened. He remembered the small details I told him. He asked about my exhibitions, about the stories behind my paintings. And each time, I felt a warmth growing in me, a careful, cautious warmth, like a seed sprouting in the soil after a long winter. It was not the fiery obsession I had once mistaken for love. It was steady, gentle, real. Meanwhile, my art grew with me. The exhibition came, and I stood among my paintings as strangers admired them, their words filling me with a pride I had never known. My parents stood by my side, their eyes gleaming with joy. He came, too. Quiet but supportive, his presence a steady anchor in the sea of voices. When I caught him watching me from across the room, his expression soft, almost proud, something inside me whispered, "This is different." This was not a man I had to kneel for. This was not a man I had to beg to see me. This was someone who stood beside me. And as I lay in bed that night, the echoes of the exhibition still swirling in my mind, I realized something. This was the beginning of a life I had never dared to dream before. A life that was truly mine. The chill of winter crept slowly into the city, painting the mornings with frost and filling the evenings with the scent of roasted sweet potatoes sold on street corners. Each day seemed to carry a rhythm of its own, gentler than the last, and for the first time, I didn't feel like I was merely surviving. I was living. The new man in my life, not a borrowed one, not a chained one, was becoming less of a stranger and more of a constant. His presence wasn't overwhelming. It was quiet, steady, like a hearth fire on a cold night. One evening, we went to a small bookstore tucked away in a side street. The place smelled of old paper and coffee grounds. As we browsed the shelves, he picked up a book and handed it to me. "This one," he said, smiling. "It reminded me of what you told me about painting, the way you see stories in colors." I looked at the cover, a collection of essays on art and the human heart. My chest tightened. No one had ever remembered such small details before. I laughed softly. "You really do listen, don't you?" His eyes met mine, calm and sincere. "Of course. Isn't that the point of getting to know someone?" His words felt like sunlight against skin that had long been cold. But with every kind gesture, every thoughtful glance came the ghost of comparison. My mind, unwilling though it was, drifted back to the man I had once called husband. I remembered another winter night, years ago. I had asked him if he wanted to walk with me through the decorated streets, where lights twinkled and families huddled together with laughter. "Don't be childish," he had said, barely glancing up from his laptop. "I don't have time for pointless things." I had gone alone that night, watching couples pass by with linked hands, my own fingers aching with emptiness. I had told myself it was fine, that he was just busy, that he would come next time, but there was never a next time. Now, standing in that quiet bookstore, holding a book chosen just for me, I realized how much I had once settled for. Another memory struck days later when he, my new companion, invited me to a family dinner. His parents welcomed me with warmth, his mother fussing over the dishes, his father cracking gentle jokes. As I sat there, laughter bubbling around me, I felt both joy and sorrow rise in my chest. Because in my past life, family dinners had been nothing like this. There was one evening in particular, after weeks of me begging him to join me at my parents' house. He had finally agreed, but the moment we sat at the table, his impatience was palpable. He barely touched his food, answered questions with clipped words, and when my mother tried to ask about his work, he interrupted with a sigh. "Do we really need to drag this out?" he muttered. The table fell into an awkward silence. My parents exchanged glances, trying to hide their disappointment. I had smiled through it all, pretending nothing was wrong, telling myself at least he came. Later that night, I cried alone in the bathroom while he slept without a care. Now, in this new timeline, as I watched my new companion's parents tease him about his childhood habits while he laughed and told them to stop embarrassing him, I felt something loosen inside me. This was what it felt like to belong. to sit at a table and not feel like an unwanted guest. The third memory returned on an afternoon when he, my new man, helped me carry supplies for my art. The canvases were bulky, the paints heavy, and yet he insisted on holding more than half. "Isn't this too much for you?" I asked, guilt tugging at me. He shook his head, grinning. "It's nothing. You've got enough to manage with your brushes. Besides, you're the artist. I'm just the delivery guy." His tone was playful, but his actions were sincere. He didn't belittle my work, didn't call it trivial. He treated it as something valuable. And that's when I remembered another afternoon from before. I had just finished a painting I was proud of, an image of the sea at sunset, colors blending into each other like a dream. With trembling hands, I had brought it to him, hoping, praying, for a word of praise. He glanced at it for no more than 3 seconds. "You wasted an entire day on that?" he said flatly. "Don't you think it's time to grow up?" The canvas slipped slightly in my grip. My throat tightened, but I forced a smile, telling him I would try harder next time. Later, when he left the room, I had torn the painting into pieces and thrown it away. Now, years later, as I watched my new companion carry my supplies without complaint, teasing me lightly about the colors staining my hands, I understood the stark difference between being dismissed and being cherished. Each day with him felt like peeling away the bruises of my past. He didn't shower me with grand promises or fiery passion. Instead, he gave me small, steady moments that healed wounds I hadn't realized were still bleeding. A book remembered, a chair pulled out, a hand extended, not demanded. And I found myself opening in return. I told him about my art, my dreams, even my fears. I didn't tell him everything, not yet. I didn't speak of the life before this one, of the nights I had cried myself to sleep, of the bitterness of dying unloved. That was a story for another time, but I shared pieces of my heart I had once locked away. He listened, always, and when he didn't understand, he asked. "You've been through something," he said once, gently, as we walked through a park where the winter roses still bloomed. I looked away, my breath clouding in the cold air. "Yes, but I don't want to live in it anymore." He didn't press. He only nodded. "Then let's live in now." Those words echoed in my heart long after we parted. Of course, I wasn't naive. I knew life wasn't perfect. I knew even gentle men had flaws, that relationships required more than warmth in the beginning. But as I compared the life I had once endured with the life I was beginning to build, the truth became clear. Love wasn't supposed to feel like chains. It wasn't supposed to demand your silence, your humiliation, your endless sacrifice. Love, real love, was steady. It was kind. It was a light that warmed rather than burned. And as the days stretched on, I found myself daring, just daring, to believe that perhaps this second chance was guiding me not just away from the past, but towards something new, something I deserved. The gala shimmered with golden light, chandeliers sparkling above a sea of glittering gowns and polished shoes. Music floated through the air, soft and elegant, mingling with the clink of crystal glasses. My hand rested in the crook of my fiancé's arm as we walked through the grand hall together. It felt surreal. Just months ago, I had stood at the edge of despair, dying unloved. Now, I stood here, beside a man who made me feel seen in every small moment, whose steady presence grounded me. The whispers that followed us no longer pierced my heart. They were just noise, insignificant compared to the warmth of his hand holding mine. "You look radiant tonight," he whispered, leaning close. I smiled softly. "It's because you're here." His eyes softened, and for a moment, the crowd around us disappeared. But fate, always twisting, was not content to leave the night untested. Because across the hall, I saw him, my former husband, the man I had once begged to love me. He stood tall, his suit immaculate, his expression as proud as ever. His eyes flicked toward me, and for a brief second I saw surprise, then irritation, then something darker. He approached, his steps confident, as though the years of my devotion still gave him rights over me. My fiancé turned slightly, instinctively protective, but I squeezed his arm gently. "Don't worry," I murmured. "He doesn't matter anymore." Still, the confrontation came. "Well," my former husband said, his tone sharp enough to cut. "You certainly move quickly. Already parading around with someone else, after chasing me so desperately?" The words might have once gutted me. They might have left me trembling with shame, desperate to defend myself. But now they barely grazed me. I looked at him calmly, my expression serene. You must be mistaken. I don't recall chasing you. His jaw tightened, his eyes flashing with wounded pride. The crowd around us shifted uncomfortably, whispers rising, but I remained still. My fiancé placed a hand over mine, his steady warmth anchoring me. I didn't need to fight. I didn't need to prove anything. His opinion was nothing but an echo of a past I had already buried. Come, I said softly to my fiancé, turning away. The night is too beautiful to waste on old shadows. And just like that, I walked away, leaving him standing there with his bitterness. But he wasn't done. Later that evening, the orchestra quieted, and he took the stage with a microphone in hand. His expression was triumphant as he announced, "Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to share my joy with you all. I will soon be marrying the woman I've always loved, the one who has stood by me from the beginning." The crowd erupted in applause. Beside him, she appeared, the woman who had been his first love, the woman for whom he had abandoned me even in death. She stood there, delicate and beautiful, leaning into him with practiced grace. The sight should have hurt, but instead, it only reminded me. Memories surged, memories of her in my past life. I remembered the day she had visited our home, feigning politeness while her eyes lingered on him with quiet possession. How she had fallen ill once, and he had abandoned me at the hospital to sit by her side. How she had looked at me with pitying eyes, as though I were the foolish intruder in a story that belonged only to them. Back then, I had hated her. I had seen her as the thief of my happiness. But now I realized she had never stolen what was never mine to begin with. She was simply the mirror that reflected my humiliation. And now, watching them stand together, I felt no hatred, only freedom. Because his path and hers no longer touched mine. As days turned into weeks, the world moved forward. The gossip of the gala, of his announcement, soon faded beneath the rhythm of daily life. He prepared for his wedding, and I prepared for mine. The difference was stark. Where his union was grand and flashy, filled with luxury and show, mine was intimate and warm. A gathering of family, friends, and those who mattered most. My mother wept as she adjusted my veil. My father held my hand tightly before walking me down the aisle. And at the end of that aisle stood him, my fiancé, my partner, my choice. His eyes lit the moment they found mine, as though I were the only person in the world. As I walked toward him, I thought of the woman I had been in another life. The woman who had stood in another wedding dress, heart trembling with blind hope, marrying a man whose eyes never once softened for her. That woman had died in loneliness and regret. But this woman, the one standing now, veiled in light, was reborn. She was walking not into a cage, but into freedom. When our hands met, when vows were spoken, when rings slid onto fingers, I felt the weight of the past lift completely from my shoulders. I wasn't just marrying him. I was marrying a life where I chose myself, where love was gentle and mutual, where family was treasured, and where my heart was no longer begging at closed doors. And as cheers and applause filled the air, as my new husband pulled me into his arms and whispered, "From today on, we'll write every chapter together," I knew. This was redemption. This was love. This was my second chance fulfilled. The years slipped by quietly, like pages turning in a well-loved book. My days no longer felt heavy. They flowed with meaning. Mornings began with laughter, sometimes over burnt toast, sometimes over hurried kisses before work. Evenings ended with warmth, paint smudges on my hands, his arms circling my waist as he teased me about leaving colors on every surface of our home. We built a life, piece by piece. I painted again, not for approval, not for recognition, but because it filled me with joy. He encouraged me, setting up a small studio by the window where sunlight poured in. When my first exhibition opened, he stood beside me the entire night, pride gleaming in his eyes every time someone stopped to admire my work. "See?" he whispered, squeezing my hand. "The world was always waiting for your colors." I smiled through tears, because once, in another life, those same colors had been torn apart in the shadows of indifference. Now, they lived. Our marriage was not perfect. No marriage ever is. We argued over small things, which couch to buy, whose turn it was to cook, whether I needed to rest more when I threw myself too deeply into painting. But even in arguments, there was respect. Even in silence, there was care. That was the difference. Love here was not a battlefield of humiliation. It was a garden. Sometimes weeds grew, but together we pulled them out. And as the seasons passed, we grew too. It was during these quiet, flourishing years that whispers of my former husband reached me. At first, I ignored them. His life was no longer mine to worry about. But the world has a way of delivering stories, even when you don't ask. His marriage, once paraded as a perfect romance, began to unravel. The woman he had chosen, his true love, was said to be often absent, traveling without him, living in circles of glamour that left him behind. There were rumors of arguments, of cold silences at their grand dinners, of photographs taken with other men that stained headlines. The scandal grew. Business partners withdrew. The image he had so carefully crafted cracked, revealing bitterness underneath. And I thought, with a strange calmness, so this is the path he chose. The life I once envied. I didn't feel triumph, only clarity, because I had once been that woman standing in his shadow, waiting for warmth that never came. Now, I was free. One spring afternoon, years into my marriage, I saw him again by chance. It was at a cafe terrace, crowded with people and sunlight. He sat alone, his suit rumpled, his eyes carrying the weight of disillusion. Our gazes met briefly. There was no spark of anger, no ache, no yearning, only a quiet detachment. He looked away first, and in that moment, I knew that the chains of my past life had finally fallen away completely. When I returned home that evening, my husband was waiting for me with 2 cups of tea, his sleeves rolled up, his hair a little messy. He smiled the moment he saw me. "You're late," he teased gently. "Did the paints kidnap you again?" I laughed, slipping into his arms. Maybe they did. And as he held me, I thought of the girl I once was, the girl who had died weeping, abandoned in a hospital bed, whispering for a second chance. She had been broken, yes. But from her ashes, I had risen. Now I lived a life where love was given freely, where laughter filled the walls, where respect was the foundation of every day. And as years continued to unfold, I realized that redemption had not come from revenge, nor from watching another's downfall. It had come from choosing myself, from daring to walk a different path, from finding love that was real. I pressed my cheek against my husband's chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "I'm happy," I whispered. He kissed the top of my head. "Good, that's all I'll ever want. For us to be happy." And as the sun set outside our window, painting the sky with colors only I could name, I knew the story of my life had finally reached the chapter it was always meant to have. A chapter not of sorrow, but of love. A chapter not of humiliation, but of peace. A chapter where the shadows were behind me and only light remained.